All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I would like to give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Kakwadash. Double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS who rule well, teach well, being great examples to us younger brothers. And peace and blessings and salutations to the hopeful that got there pushing his word and truth and in sincerity across the four winds in the name of Yahweh Bashem Shai, pushing to get up out of here. Shalom to the hopeful elect, the believers, the listeners whom have came back to the obedience of the scriptures through faith in Yahweh Bashem Shai. All right. And what I want to get into today, is dealing with, elevating in the spirit, and this is the time, of, reflection as we're coming into the time of atonement. And it's heavy spiritual times, as the left hand, they're getting ready to crank up, they're wicked, holidays for the year. All right. Beginning with Halloween. All right. Going into Christmas and New Year. Okay. Which are very satanic holidays. All right. And the Lord has given us the opportunity as we go into this season, to elevate in the spirit, to be protected. All right. Because we need that hedge. You see, we need a hedge. All right. In these times. Okay. And it's a spiritual war. And when we're on the front line, all right, that means that you're more, susceptible, to being hit. You see, when you go into it, matter of fact, let's get that in the book of Luke, okay, where Yahweh Shai told Peter. All right, so let's pull that account up. So when you go to the book of Peter, chapter 22 and verse 31, and the Lord said, Simon, Simon, behold, Satan have desired to have you, that he may sift you as wheat. Okay, Satan desire to have you, all right, that he may sift you as wheat. You see, and Yahweh Shai's telling, Peter this, okay, and Peter will be what? The head of the church, okay, on the front line of this spiritual war. So that lets you know that Satan desires, okay, those that are on the front line, okay. The more we elevate in the truth, the more we become a target unto Satan, okay. And it's his business, to sift us, all right. That's what Satan has been tasked with from on high, to attempt to sift, okay, those on the front line of this spiritual war, But if we are of the elect, the Lord gonna put it on our spirit to do what we need to do, okay, so we can be hedged, okay, so we can be hedged, man. Matter of fact, when you go to the account, let's read, all right, verse 32. It says, "But I have prayed for thee that thy faith fail not, and when thou art converted, strengthen thy brethren." So Yahweh Shai prayed, all right, for Peter, understanding that Satan was going to be at him because he was the head of the church. You see? So the more that we elevate in the spirit, all right, of course, it comes with the ability to edify more, the ability to be, more of an asset to the body, the ability to have more faith and, understanding, you see? But also, it puts us on the crosshairs of Satan more. Okay, because Satan loves, all right, to target those on the front line. That's his thing. Job, when he spoke about Job, well, Job, okay, it spoke about how righteous Job was, how much integrity Job had, okay, and that's who, okay, the Lord sent Satan on with Job, okay, and Job was being what? Tested to see how pure he was. So there's always a test, to see how pure we are, how much we believe, where our faith is at, how much we trust, where our patience is at, It's always going to be, a trying, you know, and the Lord has Satan, come from so many angles, man. You see? So the Lord utilizes Satan, to purify his elect, okay? And then also take away those, all right, who are not of us, man. So this is a heavy time, all right? The Lord is in the spirit of allowing Satan to sift, you see? And we want to pray to continue, see, enduring to the end, of course, during Jacob's trouble, and during what we got to go through, okay? Um, whether it's a concentration camp, whether it's being in the wilderness, okay? Whether it's, being separated from your family, whatever it might be, everyone Jacob's trouble is going to look different, okay? And we're going to have to endure that, all right? But even before Jacob's trouble, it's a daily enduring of the trials, all right, of Satan, man. It's a constant temptation. That old man is always, one click away. You see, that nigga's always one click away. All right, from being in the driver's seat. Okay, so it's a daily thing of endurance. All right, and the trials of Satan. And see, we have this truth to elevate. Because the trials don't get easier, but we have to elevate. To manage these things, to overcome these things, to conquer, man. You know, we here to elevate, and that's the thing. We have so much to tap into because this truth puts us on the frequency, man. And as we have this wisdom, hey, utilize this wisdom, man. We have this wisdom, and applying this wisdom is like a righteous ritual. On the path of us being perfected, the Lord has us on a righteous ritual, man. Doing the same things, going through the same motion, okay? And then mastering different things and elevate, because once you master one thing, you elevate to the next, So this is, the path the Lord has us on in righteousness is constantly mastering particular things and then elevating to the next, okay? And this time is a heavy spiritual time, especially, with the believers, fasting at the same time, okay? That makes our prayers more potent, okay? Our request I heard, which means that the Lord's going to be sending down those things in the spirit that we need, and to really benefit off this time, we have to be spiritually mature to understand and be honest with ourselves about what we need, okay, in the spirit. You see, you have to be, honest about ourselves, okay? So when as we, build up to that time of atonement, you know, we should be in the spirit of elevating, and there's so many, different things that we can tap into to get closer to our power as we learn more and more, okay? Because people look at serving the Lord as something boring, it's like you missing out. Nah, man, this is where it's at. Like the Lord has it to where we can get on the frequency, man. You see, there's certain, reading, being on particular diets, uh, you know, uh, going without, particular things for extended periods, man. The Lord has it to where we can tap into, some frequencies, man. And see, let's go here. Let's get this precept, and then I'll expound on it. So this is the book of Psalms 37. I think it's 34. Psalms 34. All right. This Psalms 34 and 8. It says, "Oh, taste and see that the Lord Yahweh Bashim Al-Shai is good. Blessed is the man that trusted in him." Okay? And to taste something is what to try it out. And the Lord has allowed us the privilege, to try him out, man. Taste, to digest this thing. You see, to really begin to live this thing. Okay, and we see that this is where it's at. Just like we was into the world, we was all into, whatever, into different things, whether it was, smoking weed, partying, hanging out, just being on that frequency of, always buzzing and, around women and you see, trying to get some money or getting money or whatever, we was on. Okay. Hey, we loved that frequency, but it was darkness, man. You see? And over time, it began to have a toll on us, man. You see, a negative effect. But see, in righteousness, now the Lord has us tapping into a whole nother frequency, man. Hey, wisdom can give you a buzz, man. You apply wisdom, like I said, you get into dieting, the exercise and learning the body, learning the herbs, tapping into the tinctures. It puts you on the frequency, man. It gives you this righteous buzz. You're sharp, you elevate, your memory, and you see, you start to operate on a spiritual level, man. You get to see things differently from a different lens. Okay, just like, because when you was, in the world, and you, smoke weed, well, it'll kind of give you a alternate reality. Okay, well, in righteousness, see, we have a different reality than everyone else. We'll operate on a different frequency than everyone else. And the Lord has given us the tools to tap into that frequency, man. Okay, we're in the time now, all right, that we have to be strategic with everything we do. You have to be strategic. You see, and we have this wisdom to tap in and to apply. See, this wisdom is manifold. Let's go with it. Okay, because we think about, King Solomon. A lot of people throw their word around, Malak, king. Well, what would kings be doing? Okay, kings weren't just, simple niggas with, okay, wine and you see chicken nuggets, man. Okay, when you go into, all right, a king, let's go here. First, let's go here. Let's get this in Proverbs. Then we'll get that in the Wisdom of Solomon. So let's get that. All right, Proverbs chapter 25. All right, at verse 2, it said, "It's the glory of the Most High to conceal a thing, but the honor of kings is to search out a matter." All right, so it is the glory of the Most High to conceal a thing. The Lord, He hides things, He buries wisdom. Okay, but He tasks His sons, all right, to go search that wisdom out. And that's how you create appreciation, all right, for children, as you make them what? Earn things, search things out, figure it out. You can't come to the rescue, of a child in every situation. He has to figure it out. That's how you obtain wisdom, by what? Figuring it out. you know? So the Lord, has us, to where we get little ailments. Hey, like brothers say, shit, we ought to be to the point where we can be our own doctor. Okay? Our own physician. The doctor goes into falsify. Okay? Well, we can be our own physician to a degree. There's certain things, you have to go to, for the body, brothers, they've been on it for years. You got brothers been on it for decades, dealing with the herbs. So of course they're gonna have, elite wisdom in it, but we should be able to heal ourselves, from, these little common colds and flus and, little ailments and aches and you see, little particular things, man. Okay. So even, from that aspect, The Lord puts us in situations, and a lot of times the easy way out, is to pay somebody to do something, or but then it be things that we can't do because you gotta be balanced in certain things. You got, you know, leave to the professionals, and then there's certain things. Hey, we can apply this wisdom and figure it out. We got a network of brothers with all this wisdom. Hey, we can figure it out. Okay, and that's us going into wisdom. Of course, it begins with going into the scriptures and getting a thorough understanding of the scriptures. Okay, first and foremost. All right, but the scriptures, okay, they bleed over into our practical life. Okay, because the mindset of the scriptures is based off living. Okay, the scriptures is instructions for life. Okay, the scriptures ain't just for doing a sit down. Okay, and then you go back to working off instincts. Okay, nah, the system. God damn. Yeah, so the system, all right, is based. I lost my thought. Oh, the scriptures, yeah, for life. Yeah, the scriptures, okay, are not just for us to, teach a breakdown and then go back to living off our instinct. No, the scriptures is meant for us to elevate in every area of our life. Okay, the scripture not one dimensional, and it says me perfectly to this. When you go to Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 7, okay. So this is the Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 7, and 17. It says, "For he have given me certain knowledge of the things that are, namely to know how the world was made, and the operation of elements." Okay, so we should know certain functions. You see, when it comes to how the world works, man, how ecosystems work. We're not, we don't have time to be an expert in all these things that we're gonna go through, but we should have some understanding on some of these things, man. That goes into elevate. Okay, that's why as a king, when he was a prince, before he would become king, he would be constantly, okay, being tutored, okay, in all different subjects. And by the time, he would become an age, he would be an expert in all these different subjects. Okay, can't be no simple, okay, all right, simple nigga trying to run the realm, okay, or the whole realm will suffer because as a king you had to make major decisions, okay, and able to make accurate, efficient decisions. You have to know how things work, okay. That's why you go into a foolish king. Everyone suffers off their king's foolishness, man. Everyone will suffer because his decision making on top will trickle down, okay, to everyone that he's ruling over, okay. So as we, all right, are being, built up in the spirit, we should elevate in every area, man. This wisdom should have us on the frequency, man. And like I say, it's a righteous buzz, okay. So going back into it, it says the beginning, the ending, in the midst of times, the alterations, okay, the turning of the sun and the changing of the season. Yeah, the beginning, the ending, and the midst of time. As the scriptures say, be not ignorant in the things small or great, because the beginning, going back to history, all right, and then it says the ending, which goes into prophecy, in the midst. understanding what's going on around us real time. Okay? And the scripture tell us to be circumspect, measure the time diligently. Well, you can only measure the time diligently, okay, by understanding what's going on real time and filtering through what? The future according to the scriptures. Okay? And then understanding the history makes us understand the present time and the future. Because the scriptures speak about how nothing is new. History merely repeats itself. Okay? How America is showing all, the symptoms of a declining empire based on what? History. Okay? You can link, you know, America, okay, to Rome Reloaded based off of history, man. Okay? And much more. So just going into it, as we speak about elevate, we should understand these things and what's happening around us, what's happening in our body, you know, from geopolitics to how our body works. We should be getting an understanding of these things and growing in these things. Okay? It says this, and the Lord has made it convenient to do that, man. First, you have this, immense amount of knowledge amongst the brothers. Okay, and then you have just, unlimited sources of information, which you have to cross-reference particular things. A lot of things too, trial and error. That's another thing, trial and error. I I enjoy, experimenting, different type of diets and eating styles, and different type of supplements, and morning routines, and, workouts, and things for clarity. The music, certain classical music, and certain hertz, quality of sleep. You see, because when you, as we becoming men of responsibility, okay, these things matter. You see, you need your wits, you need your energy, you need your memory, you need your strength, you need you get up and go. Okay, these things matter. All right, as we're becoming, leaders and judges. You see, these things begin to matter. See, when you just a nigga out here floating around, nobody depending on you, and you see, you really ain't got no real responsibility. You just a nigga out here floating around. None of that matters. Okay, you're just looking for the next thrill. Okay, you're living in the second. You see, but as we're becoming men of responsibility, these things matter now. All right, more and more. Okay, and it's gonna look different for every brother, but just putting a general perspective out there. Okay, and going into it says the circuit of years and the position of stars, the natures of living creatures, and the furies of wild beasts, the violence of winds, and the reasoning of men, the diversity of plants, and the virtue of roots, and those herbs. And see, going into the natures of living creatures, okay, and the furies of wild beasts, because depending on where you live, especially if you're out in the country or if you got like a homestead set up, see, you need to understand the purpose of animals, even to the insects. Like you got to learn, all right, what insects do what insects are needed, what type of environments these insects like. Certain plants you can plant to attract hummingbirds. Dragonflies are extremely useful. Even wasps, they're extremely helpful, to a homestead. You see, they have their purpose, man. You see, as you start to learn, even certain dogs are made just to, are bred and have the instinct to protect livestock. Certain dogs have an instinct to, protect the house. Okay, and it's just so much more, but just certain trees, just pollinators and plants that are pollinators. Okay, different sands and dirts that grow, that are, good for growing different crops. So it's like we've been removed from wisdom, okay? And this grid plays a big part in that, which, you know, just throwing the perspective out there, not saying that, everyone, because everyone's not going to be, okay, on a homestead situation, you see? But it's just throwing the perspective out there of how far we feel, just from basic wisdom, One thing about it, the grid has robbed us, of autonomy, to being self-reliant, which self-reliance really is reliance on Yahweh Bashem Al Shai, and that's another thing whenever you, if you ever get into, a garden or anything, you understand how important that rain is, because you can water your plants manually, but there's nothing like that rainwater, it just does something different, you see. I'll praise Yahweh Bashem Al Shai. Because you in the city, like, damn, it's raining, so you can't go hang out, you see? But then when you, tapped into the earth, you understand, like, nah, the earth needs rain, the ground needs moisture, you see? But it just, the Lord has to elevate, you see? And not just be Americanized Israelites, okay? We're becoming Israelites that just are captive in America, you see? So reading on, and like I said, this just going through some things. Of course, all these things that King Solomon had, it just shows you that he had, he was well-rounded in wisdom, okay, when it came to all things. And this is, the spirit we should be in, okay? And it says the nature of living creatures and the furies, okay, and the furies of wild beasts, the violence of winds, and the reasonings of men. The reasonings of men, which basically is psychology. And that's one thing too, as we're tapped into the spirit, there's a spirit dealing to where we begin to understand the psychologies of men, the reasoning of men. Okay, you get to pick up on things, because this world is full of everyone trying to get over, and everybody, most people, they just think they got you, they say, I got this nigga, but then when you understand the reason of men, you 10 steps ahead, you just watching them play out their part, but ultimately you're really 10 steps ahead of the game, because you understand the reasons of men, the motivation behind men's actions and women's actions, okay? So as we understand these things more, you see, it keeps us ahead of the game, okay? And it says, and all such things as either secret or manifest, all right, them I know. So Solomon had, an inventory of wisdom, and it was well-rounded, okay, in every area and every aspect that dealt with life, because he was ruling, a kingdom, he was ruling the Lord's people, you see. And ultimately, King Solomon was a king of kings. Kings had to check into him, So as we understand what we're becoming, this should be exciting. Wisdom is exciting when you understand, when we understand what we're becoming. Like I said, you just, still in that hangout spirit, chicken wings, you see, and Coronas, okay? If that's the highlight of your life, then, wisdom gonna be born to you, okay? Because you don't understand, hey, what we're becoming, you see. But as we understand what we're becoming, wisdom becomes extremely exciting. Every day is a journey to get better, to learn something, to try this wisdom out, you see, like in the world, all right, we was excited, to try out this weed, the bubble kush, the perk, I'm just saying, from, or you drink, you decide to try this bottle, this top shelf, this and that, okay, or this new club opening, you see, there was an excitement, okay, but how much more now for this wisdom? We should be excited to put this wisdom in effect every day, you know, and see the results. Go back to the drawing board, try it again, you know. So that's the point, Lord will, you brothers, all right, and you sisters edified once again. I want to give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushua, Bahashem, Kakadash, and double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS who rule well, teach well, being great examples to his younger brothers. And peace and blessing salutations to the hopeful elect. Shalom.